Thanks for being with us. And joining me now is Professor Osita Ogbu. Professor Osita Ogbu is a professor of development economics. He was the former chief economic advisor to the President of Nigeria and de facto national planning minister. He was also the former director of the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. Professor Ogbu, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Martin.
It might interest you to know that Professor Ogbu just came out with a book, Development as Attitude, How National Progress is Shaped by Leadership, Philosophy, and Citizens' Orientation. That book was recently presented in Abuja. And my pleasure, as always, to talk about this book and talk about other economic challenges facing not only Nigeria, but indeed the developing world and the world in general. Professor, once again, you're welcome.
Thank you.
What was the driving force in coming out with this book, Development as Attitude?
I have read a lot of what great leaders, those that have transformed their countries, what they have done, their biographies, the statements they made at the early stages of their development, the directions in which they took their country. And when I studied Singapore, Malaysia, Israel, United States, and many other countries, it dawned on me that when leaders emerge, what they say and do are very critical. In fact, it began to occur to me that in shaping ideas and policies, they come into office with a certain philosophy, a certain ideology, if you like. If you are essentially one who wants an inclusive government, it is not something that happens in between. It is something that starts from day one. If you're one who is going to lift 10 million people out of poverty, it doesn't happen by chance. They pursue it, they fight for it, they go to Congress and make statements. So I'm sure in the course of the conversation today, I will be able to illustrate some of the points that I'm making now. But that was what gave me the idea that leaders must shape progress with their own ideology, philosophy, values, and knowledge. And when you don't have knowledge, you gather people who have knowledge. So it's an interesting book because it is a book that is multi-sectoral, meaning one discussed national planning, one discussed security matters, one discussed inequality, peace and justice, a whole gamut of issues that bedeviling Nigeria and most African countries from that sort of comparative perspective of what others have done, what we need to do, and what leaders ought to do.
Okay. Development as attitude. Attitude of the leaders or attitude of the followers?
Both. The leaders also shape the attitude of followers. You set the agenda from the top. If a president goes to National Assembly and says, this my budget is targeted at lifting 10 million people out of poverty, that budget must be reflective of that agenda. It cannot just be said, because budget is a major instrument for driving policy. So if you don't set that agenda from the top, the Congress might also not follow you. If they see that you're going zigzag, there's no focus on the budget, Then they begin, even the so-called budget padding comes from a sense that the parliament gets, the Congress gets, the Senate, House of Reps, they get a sense that this is business as usual. And so, but if the tone of the leader, if the philosophy and values of the leader is reflective of both what they say and what they do, the followers will adjust.
And it looks like this gives credence to the principal agent actors theory in development, where the leaders, the principal agent, has a lot of influence in what happens to the followers.
Absolutely. Let me give you an example. In 1937, let me go back, Franklin D. Roosevelt, then President of the United States, wanted what he called a fair access to housing, fair and equitable housing access. That's what he called it. And when he took this to the American Congress, you know how Americans are, they thought this was a socialist idea. This was 1937. But guess what, Martin, look at what he said. He said, necessitous men are not free men. Those without jobs, food, and housing cannot be considered citizens and should not be held responsible for citizenship responsibility. This is him addressing Congress. That when people are hungry, unhoused, unemployed, don't expect them to exercise the responsibilities of citizenship. And in fact, in my own case, I've even added to say, when these citizens see the inequality widening, meaning a few are garnering what belongs to all of us, it becomes even worse. That citizenship responsibility even declines further. So, but he fought through, and enacted the act that started the journey of public housing in the United States, that led to Lyndon Johnson then eventually, can you imagine, in 1965, now establishing housing and urban development as a ministry. Because every ministry in the United States evolved from something. They don't just create ministries. They are solution-based. They are there to,
Like when they brought the Homeland Security
because,
Department.
exactly, to resolve that crisis of terrorism. So that kind of a man who, and even at that, he went further. He said we shouldn't judge our progress by how much we add to those who already have, but how much we add to those who do not have. So if the number of private jets in Nigeria is increasing and poverty is increasing, we should be worried. But the leaders, you can see the leader crafting a statement, pursuing it and saying, no, you guys don't understand. We need to do things for the less privileged. And this is where somebody like Jack Onde, which is also, I wrote in the book, comes in as a guy who did 30,000 housing units for the low income. That has never been equaled. When I was asked to give lecture on Jack Onde, and I said, why don't you tax those who are building in Ikoyi, Banana Island, and use it to provide housing? Because that land, in Banana Island, Ikoyi, belongs to the state, which means belongs to all of us, including the rich and the poor. So if you can sell it, tax it, that can be a source of provision of housing for the poor. So, yes, the principal, the leader, has a distinct role to direct not only policy, but a mindset change, which is very critical. Mindset change. Among those who are either his agents or even those who are in Congress or Parliament or House of Reps or Senate who are not necessarily his agents, But from his actions, his words, his policies, he can begin to change the mindset around how we do things.
And that gives me the impression of when they say leadership by example.
Yeah.
Okay, let's localize what you have done in this book as it affects Nigeria. The year between 1956 and 1966 looks like it was the golden age of Nigeria's development. And we had three men, to thank for this. Michael Okpara in the eastern region, Saduana in the northern region, and Awolowo in the western region. When we look back, most of the industries, let me go to the southeast for instance, most of the industries that exist in the southeast even today, in the greater part of south-south, were creations of Michael Okpara between these years I talked about. When you talk about the pyramids, the granite pyramids, or you talk about the cocoa and the cocoa house and the Western Broadcasting University of Ibadan, University of Nigeria, name them. These things were creations of these men and their team. Is there something that is different in the attitude of those leaders and the attitude of the current leaders who have money coming from the Federation account every month? They have oil and all that, because when we are talking about the period we are talking about, there was no oil. It was palm kernel, the groundnuts, cocoa, and all that. What is that fundamental difference in attitude between these groups of people?
They were fundamental. First of all, these men you mentioned, Pawurowo in the west, Michael Okpara in the east, Sadrano Sokoto, Ahmadu Bello in the north, were the people that fought for the independence. So first of all, there was that spirit that they fought for something, got something, and they wanted to also demonstrate value. But they were also men of value. When I was writing about Jakonde, for instance, I had to dig deep into his background. You know, part of the crisis we have is crisis of recruitment of leaders. Jakonde wasn't a person of means, so how come he became governor of Lagos State? He was truly, truly embedded in the philosophy of Awoism. And if you go and read how Awo established, many people don't know what he went through to establish that free education that he had in the West. His budget was off the mark because he didn't anticipate the enthusiasm, the sort of the numbers that will show up.
That wanted to go to school.
That wanted to go to school. But you see, an American president once said that a good government, this is James Madison, is one who understands the essence of governance and must have fidelity to that essence. And that the essence is actually to generate happiness for all. So first condition, you have to have fidelity to the object of governance, which is the generation of happiness for all citizens. But the second part of his statement, and this was said in 1778, is that you must have the knowledge of the means. In other words, even if you know that this is the object, do you have the knowledge of the means? So, when Awo ran into difficulty, sort of, in quotes, that, hey, he found a way. He said, I have already promised free education, and I must see it through. So he started perhaps constructing with mud recalling teachers who have retired, removing benefits from senior people in government in order to gather money to do what he needed to do. Fidelity to the object of governance and having the knowledge of the means to deliver. The attitude, you mentioned the universities. University of Nigeria was not cited in where Okpala comes from, Dr. M.I. Okpala. No.
Where Zik came from?
Where Zik came from. Ahmadu Bello University was not cited where the Sadwana of Sokoto came from. University of Ife, that Chief Awolowo built, was not cited where he came from. Can you see even from that very simple elementary example that these people were selfless in many ways? They did not accumulate wealth. They knew the object of governance. They also surrounded themselves with people who knew, who would advise. When Zik wanted to establish University of Nigeria, he made a lot of profound statements, both at Michigan State University and Enugu, the House of Assembly in Enugu, speaking about what the university should represent. And so when I speak to faculty and students about those statements he made in those days, I say, but, you know, he said things like the university will feed itself and feed the surrounding community. I said, what happened? He anticipated that it will be a university with significant vocation, with a large population. He anticipated these things. So there was a mind, you see, that's why I sort of talk about attitude as values, knowledge, character, mindset. So there was a mindset shift when oil came, when the recruitment process became characterized by mercantilism, exchange, who has the highest money, even governorship positions are often offered to one who can buy it. There was a mind shift from the early leaders. And like you said, the pillars for development were established. That was even when we had a development plan. We had the first and second development plan, and we have really not had any serious plans since then. Because the point I make, and it is even in the book, that you are planning in an uncommon environment. You know, you can't plan when there's no elite consensus. If the president says one thing, and the parliament, the House of Rep and the Senate are saying a different thing, how can you plan? If you present a budget, and the budget returns to the executive in a manner that doesn't resemble what they presented, how do you plan? But in the early days, there seemed to have been a convergence of ideology between even those who were in power. And they were also, they sought knowledge. Let me be honest with you. They looked for those who knew and asked for their views. The first and second national plan, people at the Nigerian Institute for Social and Economic Research were very much involved. They provided research and support. But what we are seeing now, we need a mindset shift. We need a complete reorientation of leadership to begin to understand that this is serious business and that development does not just occur. You have to cause it to happen.
Elite consensus, and what I could summarize some of the things you said to mean a common purpose. It is lacking here. Whose duty is it to cause elite consensus and to cause a common purpose among the elites and leaders and even the followers?
No, it's.
Is it a MAMSA thing? Is it?
No. It's clearly top leadership. You know, concessions, compromises. We need a leader who can enlarge the tribe, if you know what I mean. A leader who can enlarge, a transnational leader who sees everyone as one of their own. You need a leader that acknowledges that mistakes have been made. We are going to correct these mistakes. You need a leader who will galvanize citizens to understand that the problems in the Northeast is our problem, not the Northeast problem. That success in Southwest is our success. A leader who lets people know that if we are building a train in Lagos, it is not for Lagos State. It is for the nation. If people are suffering anywhere, we are all suffering. So that sort of mindset, that sort of leader will not be looking at who voted for me, who didn't vote for me. But we'll be looking at the nation as its constituency. You're already the president. You're already... So this mindset shift is critical because it permeates. When you set the tone from the top, it will be unlikely that someone will spend 160 million, for instance, to buy a vehicle, when you know that that is like 22 years' salary of a professor like me, at the highest level. I earn 5 million a year, basically. So you can also see even where the priorities lie. If this country can allow those who are in the parliament, who produce the doctors, to be so lowly paid. But that's a story for another day. But this mindset shift, and there was also something, Vin Martin. We had a competitive federation. So when cocoa was reigning in the West, palm oil was reigning in the East, and cotton and groundnut were in the North. So there was a sense of self-pride. One of the things I talked about also in the book is the absence of shame. No nation, not even families, grow when there's no shame. If you have a family member who has no shame, there's crisis. So there was a lecture I gave one time, and I said, do you guys ever say, this will not happen under my watch? A leader should be able to say, if I am the general officer commanding this division, this will stop. Because sometimes when we talk about leaders, we don't know there are leaders at various cadre. If I'm the governor of Enugu State, no one will go hungry in the next 4 years. You have to have such ambitious yardsticks. We don't even have ambitions again. We don't have big dreams about where we want to take this country. So when Lee Kuan Yew said, I want to create a nation where everyone has a stake in it now and in its future, it wasn't just a statement for statement's sake. He instituted a housing policy that is tied to their retirement program, the pension. And so 80-something% of Singaporeans live in apartments that they own. When you have a home, you now have a stake in a place. You're not a tenant. You begin, because surrounding all of these questions you're asking me is the absence of a sense of a nation. And that is why everybody is running to their family, to their constituency, to their state, to their zone. So who discusses Nigeria?
When you talk about, because it's something you have brought up in almost every interview I've had with you, a sense of nation or a sense of nationhood. How do you reconcile this sense of nation with the strident calls and desire we are seeing now, where a lot of Nigerians are saying, just like what you said about the healthy competitiveness of the regions in the 60s. Now everybody is talking about let's regionalize, let's let the states be semi-autonomous. The federal government is still huge, restructuring, probably going back to the parliamentary system, which reduced the cost of governance and reduced the powers of the governors and the executives. They became first among equals, including the president. If you didn't do well, you didn't have to go through the rigorous system of impeachment, which has never really survived in Nigeria. How do you reconcile having a sense of nation that is working together, not going into cocoons, working for the greater good of the nation? How do you reconcile that with this desire that regions should come back again and that maybe the states as they are should be autonomous to some point? How do we reconcile the two?
No, you can reconcile them. One is that there will be a nation that is Nigeria, where we have freely subscribed to. Because it frightened me, and I don't know, maybe I mentioned it in the book. I took a corps of senior civil servants who were in Kaduna for training. And the first day I walked in, I said, on a scale of 0 to 10, where does your patriotism lie? Martin, over 60% of them said 0. So I thought something was wrong. Senior civil servants, those who are supposed to execute the policies of government, are telling me patriotism is 0. So they don't have a sense that the nation stands for them and that they have something to benefit. So I stopped the lecture and I switched the lecture that early morning to issues of patriotism, trying to whip up their sense of emotional attachment to the country called Nigeria. And I started giving comparisons with other countries, some of the things Nigeria has achieved, some of the things Nigeria has done. Because if you haven't traveled around Africa, you might also think that we have not done anything, which is not true. Because I was agitated somewhat. And then of course, I went to the issue of even the core definition of patriotism, because you may hate your government, but you don't hate your country. So people sometimes mix this up. And so I gave them serious lectures. Of course, I don't know whether this helped, but the next day when I asked, the number had improved on the patriotic scale. But that's the pointer. So the agitations are coming from, you have not seen a galvanizing leader that says, we are one, I recognize the pains of all, what is your problem, let's resolve it, what are you agitating for, so those are there. And I think there's this, there's nothing wrong with saying, I am Igbo. No, that's who you are. But you are Igbo within the context of Nigeria. You are Yoruba within the context of Nigeria. You are also in the context of Nigeria. So Mahathir Mohamad had a similar challenge in Malaysia, the prime minister. Malaysia has Malays, Chinese, Indians, and others. And so a beautiful national plan was written for him. He said, no, I have to put this aside first. Let me build a nation first. You will be Malay within Malaysia, but within the context of Malaysia. You will be Chinese, but you will still be Malay uppermost. So he re-engineered the economy to make sure that perhaps the dominance of the Chinese did not mean that the Malays did not have a foothold. creating a sense of belonging. So I was in Malaysia and I saw things. I saw big cars, I saw small cars, I saw everybody was eating out, big restaurants, small restaurants. There is a sense of belonging. You can't have this huge poverty. That's the point I was making earlier. How do you create citizens when they don't have food, job, and housing? So perhaps what is being said is the region will create a sense of region, and then we can subscribe to those things that make nation, defense, foreign affairs, and so on and so forth. There is some argument in it. There is an evaluation that needs to be made because transnational leaders, though that can put the various ethnicities together, seems to be eluding us. So if you can't have that galvanizing figure, or the system does not allow such a galvanizing figure to emerge, then you understand the problem. Because the system itself, if properly operated, could have thrown up such a leader. But the current system is controlled.
Fidelity with governance. You had quoted Roosevelt, FDR.
No, fidelity is with James
Madison.
James Madison.
Is it that the crop of leaders we have don't understand that maxim that leadership must come with responsibility? That if you say you want to become the president and you become the president, that position comes with responsibility, which means that there has to be a commitment to the promises you made, to the 20 agenda or 1-point agenda or 7-point agenda. What is the disconnect when these leaders get to that position? What is the disconnect? Because somebody is hungry to serve, and they come with beautiful ideas, promises, plans, and then they get there, it's like everything collapses.
No, that fidelity is very important. I wrote about it in the book as an aspect of corruption. You can't, when you promise something and do another, that in itself is a corrupt act. It's like setting up institutions like we have. We have excellent, beautiful institutions set up to do ABCD. But if they deviate and start doing XYZ, that's corruption. With the explicit knowledge of both the management and the board. So you have to have, that's why I referred you to Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the fidelity he had. Did I not tell you that he had problem? When suddenly his budget was busted because of the number. But he said, no, I've made the promise. I must make adjustments to deliver what I said.
Does it have anything to do with integrity?
Yes, value. I have said this, please. And that's why the second part of James Madison's point is important. Do you have the knowledge of the means? Aristotle says practical wisdom is both scale and audacity, meaning I can do it. But you can do it, do you know how to do it? So if the first thing you do is, to show that you have authority, but you need to assemble people too who can help with understanding what this authority and exercise of will means, because it is both the will and scale that gives you that practical wisdom. So I think your question is a question of what kinds, because in the book I also mentioned that we seem to be making poor choices and living with the poor choices. and is repeated, over and over and over. And so on. So, and you're expecting a different result. Leaders who come into office must know this is serious business. The other problem we have is this short-termism. As soon as people come into power, especially even at the state and state governments, they're already planning for a second term. You've not done year one, but you are putting structures in place for a second term. Why don't you allow what you produce, deliver in the first term, determine the second term? People even make appointments in the first term saying this is essential for second term. And I ask myself, what does that mean? Essential for what? Go and deliver on this mandate and the citizens will vote for you. But when citizens franchise are not even well accommodated, it becomes problematic. So I think your question is not that they made the promise to get in, but they don't feel a sense that they owe the citizens. Because somebody said once that when government is no longer afraid of citizens, then something is wrong.
Is it because the ordinary Nigerian, the ordinary person in Nigeria's vote does not count? Is that why they take that liberty, knowing that even the votes can't take them out?
That could be partly part of it. And let me make a point I made at the book launch. Poverty is not only the absence of material things. Poverty, from studies in psychology and others, have shown to be a tax on the cognition of the poor. And what that means is that the poor are prone to poor choices.
Because of the environment?
Because of the poverty itself. That denial, that they don't have, it taxes the brain. And when they make poor choices, it also means irresponsible choices. So, for instance, you can't blame a poor person that he sold his voting card for 5,000. We have to understand what poverty does to people. And so, a government that comes in and doesn't tackle this poverty thing, and poverty are not very much related. And that's why we must also, I said in the book launch, begin to re-examine the model. You can practice democracy, but in a different form that accommodates the nuances that exist within our system, that accommodates this huge, our poverty is not the marginal type. You have a large poor population in a democratic setting. And the leaders themselves, why is it that when we are going for election, it looks like we are going for war? Are you not going so that people will say, you be my governor or you be my president? Why do I want to be governor by all means? So I think it's important that this mindset, attitude, reorientation, values, character, fidelity to the object of government, inclusiveness, purposefulness becomes the watchwords.
I've gone through your book, and you didn't just leave it at attitude. You talked about national integration, citizenship, and the challenge of economic policy making. You talked about leadership recruitment. You talked about development planning for inclusiveness in an uncommon environment, and many others. But I want to talk about chapter 9. How do you create a resilient Nigerian economy? Because I'm thinking that if we have a resilient Nigerian economy, it will reduce poverty, it will reduce dependence on foreign goods, it would ensure the strengthening of our currency, there'll be infrastructural development, roads, electricity, and what have you. I think this is one of the biggest challenges of our country. So I'm asking you the question, how do you or how do we as a country create a resilient, and I'm particular about resilient Nigerian economy? What are your suggestions?
The reason why that chapter is there is that globalization has made every economy interdependent to the extent that you saw happen with COVID-19. A disease in one country becomes a pandemic that is global. So the stock market in America shakes without you knowing that those who are holding that stock are all over the world. And their wealth begins to shake too. So there is a great deal of interdependence. But part of the pillars of resilience is putting structures in place. In other words, have you, and I wonder when people come from all over the world, Washington, London, to advise government, and all they are looking at are prices. Price of fuel, price of foreign exchange. They've never said, your 3 refineries are not working. We must get it to work, or we are not even giving you additional loan. What do you need for us to get the 3 refineries working? Why is that not part of the development advice and the conditionality? Why? Are these people really out for our development? So you have 3 refineries and you are importing fuel, and you are talking about resilience. So first things first. First things first. So
what would be these first things if we are counting them off our fingers?
Yeah, well, I've already counted. So the other resilience comes from understanding not only the structure of this economy, but I've written severally that without a robust manufacturing sector, we can't make progress. We can't be so import dependent, because that's what is driving even the foreign exchange. To the extent that even our services, why do we operate to universities that are substandard? I mean, when I went to university here, we were regarded as, the superior students to those who even traveled abroad. We had 6 universities that were solid. We had faculty that came from everywhere. Why can't the federal government say we are going to operate only 6 universities, each in one in each geopolitical zone, and make it world class? Why are we not using the money that we are using on things that do not matter and equip, for instance, the National Hospital or one other or 2 others and make it world class? That's part of resilience. That you are domesticating the production of goods and services your citizens need and bringing the expertise around them. Technological transformation is a leadership. It just doesn't happen. If you remember in those days when Obasanjo called a meeting of bread makers and said we're going to be using, that was transformative. It came from the top. Such policies should have been sustained. You can't allow, is it Procter and Gamble and all these people to be leaving the country? No. What do you need? Not only do they provide jobs, the manufacturing sector provides quality jobs. And you need income for people to exit poverty. Let's not make a mistake about this. It's not about palliative. It's not about trader money. It's about people being gainfully employed, people being educated for even the 4th industrial revolution that is impending. So a resilient economy will deal with issues of security so that we can produce food, but we must process that food. A resilient economy would be looking at 30-40% manufacturing contribution to GDP. a resilient economy will be looking at quality education for the future, for now and the future. So resilience, but more importantly, it will also require the same thing I said earlier about a transnational leader that recognizes, for instance, that Aba could be made a hub, that Inosim Motors could become the motto that we use, and then try to create others and link it to productions in Kanu, in Ibadan, because there are parts to be produced. So there's a whole lot that we can do once we have leadership that is driving this national sense. Because the story of China did not start all over China. It started in a particular region and has spread what they call growth poles, and so on and so forth.
And if you move away from China, the United Arab Emirates, it started in Dubai, and everybody's competing. But when we look at almost everything you've talked about in this book, it still goes back to leadership.
That's why the subtitle.
So, that's number one. Number two, when you talked about the economy, there was something you said in passing, but it's something that has drawn the nation back. No development plan anymore. Because everything you're saying and everything we've talked about, you find out that you have people doing what they want and when they want it, how they want it, and where they want it. But if there was a plan, a development plan like we used to have, you can mark them off as this is achieved. We didn't have to wait for SDGs and all that if we had a plan. So two things. Leadership. Let's talk more about recruitment, leadership recruitment. And then let's talk about why in the several decades in our development, there are no development plans. Because I still remember that old saying that when you fail to plan, you have planned to fail.
I also mentioned something about the elite consensus as underpinning. There has to be a common vision.
But you said, when I asked you about that, you talked about the leader making it possible.
No. That's what I'm saying. And I'm coming to link it to plan. That there have been some beautifully written plans. I was one of those who actually wrote that budget should move to planning so that the Minister of Finance can concentrate on treasury matter and fiscal policy. Because, planning that did not have budget lacked a bit of teeth. So you plan and then you allocate resources, especially capital budget. But guess what? You allocate this budget, there was economic recovery growth plan. And MDAs, ministries, departments and agencies, for instance, were asked to do their budget based on this plan. And they struggled. I was informed, I wasn't in government. And they did what they thought was useful, at least establish a certain correspondence between the budget and plan. But the budget gets to National Assembly. National Assembly said, we are not aware of this, your economic recovery plan. They are saying, look, these budgets are derived from. And they said, that's your business. So where's the elite consensus? And when the plan was launched, the members of National Assembly were there, at least the leadership. This is not in this current National Assembly. Of course, ERG was not this time. So you can understand, okay, if we are planning based on budget and budget gets to National Assembly, and that is why, I wrote a piece one time, whose budget is before the National Assembly? I publish it in newspapers. If it is the president's budget that is before the National Assembly, who gives the minister a right to go to the National Assembly and say my budget is small? I'm shocked. His budget is from the president. So and he has allocated to you X amount.
So even at the executive level, there's no consensus.
See, first of all, how can an MDA, part of executive, go to National Assembly and say, give me more money? The president has established priorities through the budget, right or wrong. I mean, there was a time Obasanjo was very angry. If you did it, you are in trouble. How? Are you saying the president can decide, all I'm doing this year is health? That's priority. And first of all, he's the one elected, not others. You are just an agent. If you had issues, that should have been ironed out before the budget gets to National Assembly. You don't go to National Assembly and say, double my budget. From which revenue? So, consensus is absolutely important as to the vision of where we want to take the country.
I'm not trying to interrupt, but let me ask, because a lot of Nigerians are really worried about this. I am worried. I'm a Nigerian. I'm worried that when the president budget gets to the National Assembly, you start hearing members, senators talk or say things like, I've added this, I've added that. And most times, let's say the budget got there at 100 million. As it's coming back for the president assent, it has gone up to 110 million. Is it legal? Is it proper? Is it part of the oversight that they should increase amounts allocated to various sectors?
It is constitutional. They said the president's budget is a proposal to National Assembly. But what I say is, and that is why we need to adjust our own process. Because even in the United States where we copied this, I don't think you see members of the executive going before National Congress to defend budget. The budget office of the two arms of government will be meeting to reconcile. There may be issues. There may be times when Congress holds up certain items because they want certain things done in a different way. But it doesn't get to the point of every ministry, every agency of government. Think about it, Martin. I appointed you Minister of Health. I've allocated 10 naira to you. The argument will be within the executive to resolve our own budget. And we all agree that this is what it is. Then we invite the parliament to have discussions on this budget and the direction in which the government, the reasons behind the allocation, before it gets to National Assembly. I don't think this is done. You then debate it out, argue, and then agree that this is the direction. If they have amendments, we can adjust as need be with the leadership, with those who know. If you remember, the former president was always lamenting, he was reluctant whenever he's signing the Appropriation Act. This is not what I sent, but I don't have a choice. You can't operate in that manner. And that is why consistently we keep saying budget performance, 50%, 60%. Because the revenues can't match the appropriation that comes out from the Congress or from the National Assembly.
We're rounding off.
Thank you.
How do we prepare Nigeria how do we prepare Nigeria's socio-political and economic environment for this fourth industrial revolution that you have constantly said has not taken off? And how do we make it take off? Because that's the final part of your book.
Well, Martin, you and the viewers should get. Incidentally, for you, you already have a copy of the book. But I think the book will soon be in the bookstores. I think a place like Roving Heights, where they can go and buy and read. I can't say everything that is in the book. But the interesting part about the fourth industrial revolution is not that it hasn't taken off. It's here already. The artificial intelligence is driving most things, driverless car, Internet of Things, robotics. They are here. In fact, we have a very small window to exploit our population in the manufacturing sector before robotics takes over. They are more efficient. They have no leave, no rest time, and so on. But they are still very expensive, let's be honest. So we have a small window that we can still exploit. But, the state of Israel, and I forgot to give an example from there. There's a small book called The Startup Nation, The Story of the Economic Miracle of Israel. It's a must read for my students. I think you've read it as part of ideas listed. It's interesting. Leaders are entrepreneurial. Ben-Gurion, Shimon Peres, when they started pushing for the aeronautic industry for Israel, they could not feed themselves. But they saw tomorrow. Leaders see tomorrow. Leaders don't see today. They see further than others see. And they see before others see. And they pushed on. They are entrepreneurial. A state governor should be entrepreneurial. What can I do to facilitate you, the private sector, to come and do what you need to do, even if it means my buying equity in it? I go to states and they're taxing private primary and secondary schools. I said, are you okay? You should be asking them, what can I do to improve the quality of education you are delivering for my citizens? It's not a revenue source. So the whole idea that we don't even understand the essence and the externality that education brings to development. So the fourth industrial revolution is here, but we are still, in fact, I'm not sure we have even dealt with the second industrial revolution, which is to feed the population. The third was, of course, ICT related, which we are still grappling with. The fourth is here already. And we are going to be having a forced transition into it. Because Nigerians also make this mistake of saying we have a large market. We don't have a large market. We have a large population.
Is it not? That's very critical.
No, but it's important they make the decision. A market is defined by purchasing power, not by number.
I was going to say, is it not advisable? Is it not local wisdom for us to go do what is and was needed to be part of the second industrial revolution, third industrial revolution? Before we jump, we do a double jump into AI and all that.
No, it's not a double jump. It's not you doing the double jump. You didn't hear me say forced transition.
False.
Forced.
Okay.
You'll be forced to transit.
Okay, we'll be forced to transit.
Because
but you might not be ready.
No, but you already, AI is around. So if everybody is having a driverless car, it will come here. So forced transition will exist. It's like a forced demographic transition. When we start bringing, population reduction is actually associated with income growth. But sometimes we try to force that transition with programs and projects to reduce fertility. So the same way, because we're part of a globe that is transiting, you just have to link in. If you see the advances,
but the foundations will be wrong.
No, but that is why we are saying, for instance, do you know the number of students entering for law, economics, sociology? Triple the number that is going for engineering, mathematics. How many PhDs are we producing in mathematics? Why are we not incentivizing them? Why are we not giving incentives for people to go into engineering, science, technology areas, like we did in the 70s for education when we wanted to produce teachers. These are things government can do. We need top-level engineers. We need 2, 3 world-class engineering school. How can you make this transition when there's no single top-level engineering school, well-equipped, world-class? One. India has how many? In fact, it's when you don't get admission to Indian Institute for Technology that you seek for admission in top American schools. Why can't we produce one? Why can't we establish 1 or 2?
Development as attitude. What's your last word?
Well, leaders must direct the nation properly with values, integrity, ethics, purposefulness. Citizens themselves will adjust. The citizens have a reason to reorient themselves when they see what leaders do. And the citizens themselves must be educated to also not place undue demands on leaders. But it is the leaders that will show them that what they do is in their interest.
Well, for me, attitude on the part of the leaders, good attitude on the part of the followers. And a combination of the two might give us the foundation for proper economic, infrastructural, and development growth. I've been speaking with Professor Osita Ogbu. Professor Osita Ogbu is a professor of development economics, former director of the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and of course, he was former chief economic advisor to the president of Nigeria. Professor Ogbu, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And no doubt, a lot of Nigerians will be reaching out for your book. And I hope not just ordinary Nigerians, that the leaders who claim they don't have the time will make our time to read this book. I read it, and it made a lot of sense to me. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
And
it.
our program continues in a moment.